all carbohydrates bad? Absolutely not. I do recommend for my clients usually a low carb diet, but it's not because carbohydrates are bad. So let's talk about carbohydrates. Hello everyone, my name is Sippy Livne. I'm a nurse and certified food addiction counselor and an international expert on food addiction and sugar addiction. And I want to talk about carbohydrates because the popularity of low carb diets and the ketogenic diet specifically is sort of giving a bad rap to carbohydrates. I definitely do not think all carbohydrates are bad. We have three macronutrients in our food, right? Fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Today we're going to talk about the carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates are not just in wheat or grains. Carbohydrates are in a lot of foods that are even eaten on low carb diets, in vegetables, in nuts, legumes, good quality grains, and those are the good carbohydrates. I separate the carbohydrates into three categories. There's good, bad, and toxic. So what are the good carbohydrates? The good carbohydrates are the ones that are found in nature, in natural foods. And the reason why they're good, because here's the thing. All carbohydrates are basically sugar molecules that are holding hands. The question is, are they holding hands tight or loose? What is their rate of absorption? And how are they found? So when they are found in nature, for example, in a tomato, or even in an apple, or in some quinoa, or in some garbanzo beans or chickpeas, well, those sugar molecules are bound very tightly together by fiber. Now, what the fiber does, in short, I explain this very, very extensively to the people who come to my sugar-free recovery program, is that the fiber in these healthy carbohydrates makes sort of like a mesh in our gut, which slows the absorption of the sugar molecules. And it also really gives a very protective, it protects our gut, and it helps heart health, and it helps weight loss, and it helps also sugar, so that our sugar levels don't go up, peak. They just go up gradually. So it was really good for our metabolic health. It also makes these carbohydrates less addictive because we're not getting them absorbed all at once. The bad carbohydrates are when you take these carbohydrates, let's say from a whole kernel of wheat or spelt, or from a quinoa, or from chickpeas, or from whatever it is, carrots, okay? And you do take out the fiber, which is even worse. That makes it even worse, bad carbohydrate. For example, white bread. And then it's basically, they just took out the sugars that don't taste sweet, the starches from these carbohydrates, took out the fiber, and then you eat it. Spikes your sugar, which spikes your insulin. The insulin is the problem, not the sugar, because when we do that, if we do that rarely or just in a very limited way, our body can handle it. But what is happening today is people are eating that as most of their food. And then that overtaxes our insulin system and causes inflammation and puts us at risk for many, many, many metabolic diseases. Even if we take those whole carbohydrates with the fiber, if we pulverize them into a very fine powder and then make them into a flour, and from that make a bread or cookies or pretzels or whatever it is, so even then, the fiber, if it's like that mesh you put in the drain of your sink, if we're pulverizing it into very, very tiny pieces, then the surface area of those carbohydrates is much, much bigger. The absorption rate is much faster. And basically, we're still getting that peak of sugar in our blood, overtaxing the insulin system, still bad carbohydrates. Yes, the ones that they take out the fiber are worse, but the ones that are just made into a flour with the fiber, it's really not the same. Eating pasta from pea flour is not the same as eating a cup of peas as in your salad, as a healthy carbohydrate that has also a nice amount of protein in it. And then we have the toxic carbohydrates. My team and I make a huge effort to consistently put out high quality videos to help you on your way to health. If you're getting value from these, you can help us reach more people by liking, sharing, and commenting on this video. Thank you. The toxic carbohydrate basically are the foods that have in them fructose, the sugar that gives a sweet taste. For example, table sugar has half glucose, half fructose, half of it is fructose. High fructose corn syrup has even more. Most of the sweet sugars have in them fructose, and fructose is absolutely toxic to our system. It is what causes fat to accumulate in the liver. It is very, very addictive. The other sugars, when they were absorbed quickly, can also become addictive. But these sugars, the fructose in our sugar is super toxic. And the truth is that in nature, it was very rare. So our body doesn't know how to deal with it. I mean, when was there fructose? If like once in every few months somebody found a honey hive, or even fruit. In fruit, there is fructose. But fruits, until very recently, were smaller, not as sweet, they were local, and they were seasonal. So people didn't eat a lot of fruit. So fruit, yes, it is a healthy food, but it should be eaten in limited quantities. But if you take that fruit that has the fiber in it, that slows the absorption of the sugar, and you put it in a ninja and make out of it fruit shake, well, then all the sugars are very readily available. They're absorbed all at once. And then we're getting again those sugar spikes that are harming our health. And here the sugar spike has in it already, not like a piece of white bread, it has already that fructose that is absolutely toxic to our system. So as you can see, there are good carbohydrates, there are bad carbohydrates, and there are absolutely toxic carbohydrates. One of the biggest problems, one of the reasons, there are two main reasons why I recommend, usually for most of my clients, of course it is always a personal recommendation and choice of the people who come to my sugar-free recovery. But the reason why I, in general, as a rule, recommend a low-carb diet is for two reasons. First of all, out of the three macronutrients, carbohydrates are the most addictive. And the people who come to my program feel like they're addicted to food. Usually it will be carbohydrates, either the sweet carbohydrates or the starchy carbohydrates like breads and baked goods. And they feel like it controls them instead of them controlling it. They feel like a heavy smoker towards cigarettes. It's just something, even when they don't want it, they feel driven to eat it in amounts that harm their health, and they know it's harming their health. Those are the people who come to me. And out of the three macronutrients in our food, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, carbohydrates are the most addictive. And when they're in their bad and toxic forms, they're even more addictive. Absolutely. You know, a Coke, I tell my kids, if you see a bottle of Coca-Cola on the table, you may as well be looking at a box of Marlboro cigarettes. It's the same damage, the same toxicity, and the same way it's addicted. And by the way, it's marketed aggressively the same way cigarettes were in the 40s and 50s before it was regulated. So my clients are addicted to carbohydrates usually, so a low carbohydrate diet will be effective for them. The other reason is because a low carb diet, by definition, limits the bad and toxic carbohydrates. And that is why, if you ask me, one of the huge reasons why low carb diets work. Because by definition, a low carb diet will take out the bad carbohydrates, which means flours, and the toxic carbohydrates, which means those sweet sugars. So that's why I like that. But I always say to people who feel like they're addicted to food and they do low carb or ketogenic diets, there are other things besides the amount of carbohydrates in the food or the form even of their carbohydrates that we need to take into account, because addiction has its own characteristics and things that need to be taken into consideration besides how many carbohydrates it has. So I hope that's given you a little bit of general outlook and understanding about all this discourse around carbohydrates. Now, if you feel like you're addicted to sweet or starchy or ultra processed foods and you've tried limiting or quitting and it hasn't really helped, you can reach out to me. I have a personal personal sugar-free recovery program, 3-month program to set you on your way and teach you how to live in serenity and freedom with your food choices for life. The link is below. Hope you enjoyed this. Love to hear your comments and feedback below. Bye-bye.